Sun-tzu, Wade Giles romanization Sun-tzu, also spelled Sun-tzu, personal name Sun-wu, flourished 5th century BC, reputed author of the Chinese classic biography, The Art of War, the earliest known treatise on war and military science. Sun-tzu, a military strategist and general who served the state of Wu near the end of the spring and autumn period, 770 to 476 BC, is traditionally considered the author of The Art of War, but the work is more likely to have been written early in the Warring States period, 475 to 221 BC, at a time when China was divided into 6 or 7 states that often resorted to war with each other in their struggles for supremacy. The Art of War is a systematic guide to strategy and tactics for rulers and commanders. The book discusses various maneuvers and the effect of terrain on the outcome of battles. It stresses the importance of accurate information about the enemy's forces, dispositions and deployments, and movements. This is summarized in the axiom "Know the enemy and know yourself, and you can fight 100 battles with no danger of defeat." It also emphasizes the unpredictability of battle and the use of flexible strategies and tactics. The book's insistence on the close relationship between political considerations and military policy greatly influenced some modern strategists. Mao Zedong and the Chinese Communists took from the Art of War many of the tactics they utilized in fighting the Japanese and, later, the Chinese nationalists. Fundamentals. The term strategy derives from the Greek strategos, an elected general in ancient Athens. The strategoi were mainly military leaders with combined political and military authority, which is the essence of strategy. Because strategy is about the relationship between means and ends, the term has applications well beyond war. It has been used with reference to business, the theory of games, and political campaigning, among other activities. It remains rooted, however, in war, and it is in the field of armed conflict that strategy assumes its most complex forms. Theoreticians distinguish 3 types of military activity. 1. Tactics, or techniques for employing forces in an engagement, for example, seizing a hill, sinking a ship, or attacking a target from the air. 2. Operations, or the use of engagements in parallel or in sequence for larger purposes, which is sometimes called campaign planning. And 3. Strategy, or the broad comprehensive harmonizing of operations with political purposes. Sometimes a 4th type is cited, known as grand strategy, which encompasses the coordination of all state policy, including economic and diplomatic tools of statecraft, to pursue some national or coalitional ends. Strategic planning is rarely confined to a single strategist. In modern times, planning reflects the contributions of committees and working groups, and even in ancient times the war council was a perennial resort of anxious commanders. For example, Thucydides' History of the Peloponnesian War, circa 404 BCE, contains marvelous renditions of speeches in which the leaders of different states attempt to persuade their listeners to follow a given course of action. Furthermore, strategy invariably rests on assumptions of many kinds, about what is lawful or moral, about what technology can achieve, about conditions of weather and geography, that are unstated or even subconscious. For these reasons, strategy in war differs greatly from strategy in a game such as chess. War is collective. Strategy rarely emerges from a single conscious decision as opposed to many smaller decisions, and war is, above all, a deeply uncertain endeavor dominated by unanticipated events and by assumptions that all too frequently prove false. Clausewitz's central and most famous observation is that war is a continuation of politics by other means. Of course, war is produced by politics, though in common parlance war is typically ascribed to mindless evil, the wrath of God, or mere accident, rather than being a continuation of rational diplomacy. Moreover, Clausewitz's view of war is far more radical than a superficial reading of his dictum might suggest. If war is not a mere act of policy but a true political instrument, political considerations may pervade all of war. If this is the case, then strategy, understood as the use of military means for political ends, expands to cover many fields. A seeming cliché is in fact a radical statement. There have been other views, of course, in The Art of War, often attributed to Sun-tzu, 5th century BCE, but most likely composed early in China's Warring States period, 475 to 221 BCE, war is treated as a serious means to serious ends, in which it is understood that shrewd strategists might target not an enemy's forces but intangible objects, the foremost of these being the opponent's strategy. Though this agrees with Clausewitz's ideas, the art of war takes a very different line of argument in other respects. Having much greater confidence in the ability of a wise general to know himself and his enemy, the art of war relies more heavily on the virtuosity of an adroit commander in the field, who may, and indeed should, disregard a ruler's commands in order to achieve war's object. Whereon war asserts that talent for high command differs fundamentally from military leadership at lower levels, the art of war does not seem to distinguish between operational and tactical ability. Whereon war accepts battle as the chief means of war and extensive loss of human life as its inevitable price, the art of war considers the former largely avoidable. The expert in using the military subdues the enemy's forces without going to battle, and the latter proof of poor generalship. Whereon war doubts that political and military leaders will ever have enough information upon which to base sound decisions. The art of war begins and concludes with a study of intelligence collection and assessment. To some extent, these approaches to strategy reflect cultural differences. Clausewitz is a product of a combination of the Enlightenment and early Romanticism. The art of war's roots in Taoism are no less deep. Historical circumstances explain some of the differences as well. Clausewitz labored under the impact of 20 years of war that followed the French Revolution and the extraordinary personality of Napoleon. The art of war was written during the turmoil of the Warring States period. There also are deeper differences in thinking about strategy that transcend time and place. In particular, differences in contemporary discussions of strategy persist between optimists, who think that the wisely instructed strategist has a better than even chance, other things being equal, to control his fate, and pessimists, such as Clausewitz, who believe that error, muddle, and uncertainty are the norm in war and therefore that chance plays a more substantial role. In addition, social scientists, exploring such topics as inadvertent war or escalation, have been driven by the hope of making strategy a rational and predictable endeavor. Historians, by and large, side with the pessimists. In the words of British historian Michael Howard, one of the best military historians of the 20th century, most armies get it wrong at the beginning of a war. Strategy in antiquity. The ancient world offers the student of strategy a rich field for inquiry. Indeed, the budding strategist is probably best advised to begin with Thucydides' history of the Peloponnesian War, circa 404 BCE, which describes the contest between two coalitions of Greek city-states between 431 and 404 BCE. Athens, a predominantly maritime power, led the former members of the